As far as today's discussion, we're going to be going over some of the national statistics, some of the indicators are out there, what it means. Also at the state level, some of the programs that are in the pipeline as far as funding that's coming in, what we're also seeing in the near future. There might be another wave of funding that's going to be coming. We have some case studies as far as businesses and pivoting, what they're doing to diversify their business model, basically to survive. I mean, that is, the position that we're in right now. We conducted a business impact study, and so we're going to be providing some of the results that came out of that study that was for local businesses and local industry and what those businesses are doing. And I think you'll be surprised to see what some of those numbers look like. And then also relaunching. I mean, what is it going to take to now that the governor has come out and said that, we're going to start taking the next steps to reopen our economy, reopen certain businesses, and what does it entail as far as relaunching? And then I'll wrap up with some of the other events that we're going to be having here in the near future. Okay, so as far as at the national level, and I will apologize in advance if you can't read everything that's on here. We are going to be sending this presentation out to you all as well, all the registrants for this webinar, as well as the audio and some of the notes that we're going to be taking. But I do want to point out some of the main points and some of the recurring themes that we see here. One is, again, just as far as stimulus and funds, the government's not being shy about putting money out there. Last week, I think it was by Thursday of last week, the first round of funding, I mean, that dried up. That spigot had already dried up. So they had already been working on a second round of funding. So that's already been announced. And that's about $310 billion in funding that's being made available. Part of it's through the CARES Act. And out of that, there's $30 billion that's being made available through insured depository institutions, credit unions, then an additional $30 billion for community financial institutions, small insured depository institutions, and some other credit unions. In a nutshell, it's basically all of your local banks and those that handle money and funds. And the process is basically going to be very similar to the first one. So again, if you for some reason did not apply the first time around, or for some reason you did not qualify, we definitely urge or recommend that you consider putting in for this second round, because again, this is something that I said in the community update. It might be let's treat this like it's a once in a lifetime. We've never seen anything like this in the past. As far as other loan programs, now they've kind of opened it up also. So they're making some funds available for other sectors, such as agricultural enterprises now. Now they're trying to include more sectors and more businesses as they had not done in the original one. Also for public health funding, a lot of money now going to hospitals, those healthcare providers that are now being considered first responders for this COVID-19 pandemic. And then $25 billion in testing, and that's going to states and localities. And again, this is just, federal government coming out and basically saying, we need to help our first responders, whether it's, through equipment, services, so on and so forth. Again, we can't stress enough, let's treat this like a once in a lifetime. If you did not put in for it the first time around, definitely try to get it this time. And from what we understand, there might be another round of funding, but that's going to be later in the summer, and that's dependent on what's happening now as we start to look at reopening our economy. Now, as far as looking at some of our local businesses and what they're doing to pivot, just a little disclaimer: we're not saying this is what you should do. We're not here to endorse. We're simply just providing some examples of thinking outside the box, some examples of some of the businesses, how just providing these case studies, what they're doing, all in the name of pivoting, helping their business, again, to the diversification, keeping the community engaged, which we've seen in Kerrville done time over again. What they're doing to keep their employees, if not all of them, at least part of their workforce employed, and also providing a very valuable service to our community. First example, and I know there's several businesses in county-wide that are doing this, as well as throughout the U.S., where they're now shifting some of their efforts and they're making masks. Some of the more entrepreneurial businesses out there, some entrepreneurs, that's what they're doing. They're now reallocating their resources, their workforce. They're making masks. Some of them are selling them. Some businesses are actually donating them to first responders, to hospitals, so on and so forth. So this is a more obvious example of what businesses are doing to continue to keep their name out there, continue to be engaged, and again, providing that very valuable service. Jeremy's operation, Pint and Plow, they are now providing a grocery store option, which is very interesting. So, for instance, like myself, we're a family of 5. Sometimes we can't afford to, buy, 5 separate meals at a restaurant, even, before the pandemic on a daily basis. So the next best thing, in another way of the business providing a valuable service, and our part as, consumers in the community to help businesses, is there's this meal prep program where it's great they provide all the necessary ingredients, everything that you need to pull a full meal together. And it's basically a family-sized meal. And also some items that perhaps you cannot find at your local grocery store. As we've seen, some of the grocery stores are running out of items. And because we are Kerrville and we are a hub that pulls in from many different communities in almost a 100-mile radius, we'll even see people from San Antonio shopping at our local grocery stores, which is good for us, because they can't find certain things in San Antonio. But it also puts a burden in as far as our local resources are concerned. So, Pint and Plow, providing some of those items that you perhaps could not find at your local grocery store. The other one is the distilleries. I mean, some of the distilleries from here all the way up to Austin, one of them is High, which is that little community between here and Austin, just up the road from us. They are now turning some of their alcohol resources into producing hand sanitizer. I'm not too sure if they're actually selling it to the public or if it's for first responders and for hospitals or healthcare workers. But again, it's another great example of how they're pivoting. I think Tito's Vodka out of the Austin area as well is doing the same thing. Just, diversifying their portfolio. Who knows if they're going to keep this now moving forward, since it's going to be in high demand, in addition to, their alcoholic products that they make. But, keeping their name out there, being relevant, and providing a very valuable service to the public. I will say that we were in a virtual conference meeting with the Texas Workforce Commission, and that was with their director, Dale Robertson. And they have said that they are in the process, or have already announced that they're reallocating some of their resources and making, some of those funds now available for companies that are looking to create products or provide a service for hospitals, whether it's equipment, particular services for healthcare workers and for the first responders. And if your business is doing something like that, then they would provide money for your workforce, whether it's for training or whatever it might be, that would go to your bottom line. So that's, again, coming in through the state. So just keep in mind that a lot of what we do at the Economic Development Corporation is we are your voice as it pertains to Austin and to Washington, D.C. when it comes to these different programs, to make sure that you're represented and that we have our fair share of money coming into our community. With that, allow me to introduce, and I think you all know her very well, Theresa Midcath. She is the manager of business retention and expansion. And if you don't know what business retention and expansion, which is a mouthful, if you don't know what that is, the acronym is BRE. That is, most economic development organizations have a BRE person or a BRE division. And they are the ones that work with local business and local industry to ensure that they have the tools and the resources that they need in order to grow their businesses. And again, we are the ones that work with you hand in glove to make sure, whether it's, as of a month ago, we were doing very, very well, or if it's today where things are not going very well, we're always there to make sure, and Theresa is the person that makes sure that you have everything that you need to get through these kinds of these roller coaster rides, if I could use that term. So with that, I will turn it over to Theresa.
Gil, thank you very much. I appreciate that introduction as well as all of the information. It's always good to hear about what's happening on a national level and also kind of where that puts us in comparison to the rest of the nation. So I know you spoke a little bit about the business impact study, and we've had just a great response to that impact study so far, about 150 responses. And some of that information was not very surprising. One of the questions that we did ask was whether or not your business had been negatively impacted, and about 91% of the respondents did say that they had been negatively impacted. And as you can see there was a pretty even split of about 42% operating between 75 and 100% of operations, and 25 to 50% of operations. And I think the other part, though, that stood out to me in this section of the study was that of the 150, about the 150, 16% of those respondents said that their business was temporarily closed. So we also did have an opportunity to put an open response portion to the study. And a lot of the input that we received during that portion said that even though they were temporarily closed, meaning their physical doors were closed, they had opted for a strategy where they were still able to bring in some kind of money for the business. So they had opted for an alternative strategy. So I think that talks a lot about, or says a lot about, the resiliency and the innovative spirit within our community as far as our businesses are concerned. So another part of that impact study was talking about the grants and the different funding options that are available for the businesses. About 53% of those respondents said that they had applied for the PPP, 9% for the EIDL, and again, 27% said that they have not applied and did not foresee that they would be applying for assistance in the future. The other part that really gave me a great sense of hope for our community, and again, this is really more about projections and what they see, and some of this will be more based on what state mandates are, but 60% of those respondents said that they felt that they would be fully back to full operations within 3 months, and 30% within 6 months. And again, I think the biggest thing for me in the weeks that I've been speaking with businesses and seeing the things that have been happening within the community, the strategies that have been implemented or increased throughout this period of time, 35% of those responding to our survey said one of the strategies that they've implemented was collaborating with other businesses and local entities. And I think that just speaks volumes again about what Kerrville is about, how they choose to navigate their ways through crisis. And the other one that wasn't very surprising for me was the 27% navigating, implementing, or increasing their online sales presence. I think that there was a lot of, most businesses already had some kind of an online sales presence, but I think opening that up to an increased part, maybe more social media or posting more things for online sales. But again, that for me, that one wasn't as surprising. So for us as an economic development organization, what is really important now and even moving forward is that we are providing the best resources for our businesses in our community. And one of the main things that we wanted to get out of this survey is to be able to have the information that we need to assist in the relaunch effort. And so we asked some very specific questions about items that businesses might need for that relaunch and for the process moving forward. And overwhelmingly, the three that stood out at the top were health and safety guidance and guidelines. And of course, those would probably come down more from our state agencies. And then those social distancing guidelines, as well as training. And next in line with those were maybe some upgrades for their technical needs. Some of those are already in place, but there's definitely a need they have felt for some either infrastructure as far as within their buildings or some updated technical equipment. And then as well with some actual maybe delivery means. So trucks or cycles or cars to be able to deliver products. And I think the other part of this that we realized when we were receiving the feedback on this survey was that for the businesses that have already been operating at least a portion of their percentage of operations, a lot of this they've already implemented. And so where a lot of our efforts are going to be coming in is helping those businesses that have had their doors temporarily closed, maybe implementing some of these things that aren't there right now. So some of the businesses that have been allowed to be open and operating have a little bit of a head start. And so it'll be really essential for us to be able to help those businesses that are kind of starting from scratch right now to gain that same level of operations. So across the board, whether you've been operating or you're getting ready to open your doors, or you may have a little bit more time before you're able to open and start operating, this is a great time to look at your hiring and your training. Before we were in a stage where it was hard to find employees, and now we're in the other side of things where hiring the right kind of person and setting them up for success is going to be a key for your business. And one of the easiest ways to do that is through technology that you probably already have on hand, not going to cost your company any additional money. And it's a great opportunity for you to really create training that is very specific to your company, to your business, to your needs. And it can be something as very simple as, you know, how you're building salads for your business, how you're folding your napkins, how you want your customer service representatives to be answering your phones. And you can build those training those training videos, putting them up on a private YouTube channel for people to start that training at home right now, or to have that as a library on a training computer inside of your building. And the other part of this is understanding that these are all baby steps, whether you've been operating now or you're going to relaunch soon, and that things aren't really going to go back to the way that they were before. Everybody keeps throwing around that word new normal. And really, we don't know what new normal is. We don't even really know what that is today. We don't know what that looks like tomorrow. But what we can be firm on and what we do know is what is working for us today. And so it would be important to maintain all of those things that are working for your business today. So all of those proper cleaning and hand washing and hygiene regimens, your PPE, your social distancing, cutting the costs that you've done already for your business, whether you're selling gift cards, your social media, or your digital marketing that you've put in place, the delivery services that you've put in place for your business, those are all great things to keep and to maintain if they're working for your business, even moving forward. Those are things that you can continue to do. But then also, as things begin to open up, looking at how you can implement some additional things to keep your customers feeling safe as they begin to enter your establishments. Looking at, again, some of the things that will come down as state mandates, but also just, again, to keep your customers and the people in the community, letting them know that you're thinking about their feelings and their safety. And that might be limiting occupancy. That might be setting your restaurant up for reservation only seating, maybe some private seating where it's some curtains or some enclosures to provide those kinds of barriers. And maybe you're setting up for appointment only type of boutique shopping. So just some ideas. Again, like Gil said, these are just kind of some suggestions, some things that we're also hearing out there, some things that we might just be able to pass on to help in those relaunching efforts.
That's great, Teresa. And I'm going to add to what you were saying right now, as far as what this is going to look like now that we're looking at taking those baby steps for that reopening. And what we're hearing from our economic development counterparts, the International Economic Development Council in Washington D.C., the Texas Economic Development Council here in Austin as well, is for instance, bars, restaurants, what will social distancing look like? And the answer is, we still don't know. I mean, we have an idea of what it might look like, but I think there's an opportunity for some of our local business owners to start, really, doing a deep dive as to what is it that you need to move around within your business, and not necessarily just a restaurant, any kind of business. Something else that's being asked is, are we now going to have businesses doing a temperature check, at the door before they walk into the building? As crazy as it may sound, that might be the way to create consumer confidence for people to actually go into your facility. On a larger scale, sporting events. Do I miss sports, right, on TV? Absolutely. But even at the local level, when we've got Tidy football coming back, hopefully. What's that going to look like as far as large crowds? And for that matter, any kind of event. It could be the Fourth on the River. Our local theaters. What is that going to look like? Things to start thinking about. The answer is, we still do not know. We're not sure until this pandemic is really in control, in full control. And full control is still a year to 18 months out, as we heard from Cody at the community update and in our local media, who heads up Peterson Medical Center. Vaccination for this is still a year to 18 months out, and that's when we're really going to have full control over this pandemic. Now, from an economic development standpoint, and what some of the when these funds are being made available, what they're looking at is more of the bigger picture. What are some of the industries that will not be able to work from home? So some of our local business owners, there's some businesses that need to have that community presence. What businesses or what industries have a greater multiplier effect? So there's going to be a lot of focus in making sure that those operations are up and running. We start looking at GDP. Is something else, and again, this can be the small, mom and pop shop, to the much larger, operations in our region, in our community. Which businesses, manufacturing facilities, retailers, commercial outlets, offices are at low risk of spreading the coronavirus? So now let's look at it from that standpoint. That's how they're looking at everything right now. So that's where we can be proactive. Some of our entrepreneurs and local business people, looking at your operations. How can you make it low risk for the coronavirus. So things that we were not thinking about a month and a half ago are now, front and center as we move forward in our daily lives. So with that, again, thank you, Teresa. Now, as far as before we get into some of the questions, and I see a couple here in our chat box. Up next with the KDC, I'll take this time to now kind of do a little promo. We have the Over the Fence podcast, the Neighborly Words of Wisdom, and that's an interview that Teresa is conducting on a weekly basis. Last week, she had a fantastic interview with Clint Fiore, who's a local entrepreneur whom, if you don't know, you should try to get to know him, and it's about an hour long. And I think we have time right now to listen to some of those. And he does a great job of just kind of like, walking through several scenarios now that we're in this pandemic and having businesses survive. So you can get that one on our website at kerredc.com or on the kerrvilletogether.com website, which is the umbrella for a lot of the different campaigns and your one-stop shop for anything having to do with this pandemic and business. Next week, we're going to be launching the next podcast. And again, that's with Jennifer Lariolis, who's the development director of All Plastics Manufacturing. They're a medical device manufacturing firm, which their business has now really grown. And it was already growing before this, but they're also supplying now, to some of our, to the healthcare sector and some of the hospitals. That will be made available early next week. And I definitely urge you all to listen to that great interview. Next Thursday, we're going to be having, or the following Thursday, the next webinar, and that is going to be reopening of the sectors in Texas. So what is it that we're getting from the Office of the Governor, and according to them, what the next steps are going to be, and what are some of the businesses that can start reopening, and how we're going to go about that, and what we can do to support that as well. And then at 10:30 a.m., April 30th, it's going to be the Community Weekly Update that's headed by our mayor, Bill Blackburn, as well as the county judge, our city manager, president of Schreiner University, Peterson Medical Centers there, as well as our superintendent and myself. We're just providing an all-around update as to what's happening in our community and what we're doing to be proactive about the current situation. Now, as far as some of the questions that we have here, we'll take the next 5 minutes. We want to be respectful of your time to answer a couple of questions here. And one is, and I'm going to rephrase this one because they asked it differently, but Teresa, I would say in your professional opinion, with your experience both coming in from a chamber background and now with your knowledge as far as business retention, expansion, and economic development, what is your biggest takeaway from this survey, which I must say, having, about 150 people participate in the survey for a community our size is pretty significant. So what's your biggest takeaway from this survey?
Community collaboration, definitely. So over the last several weeks, but even leading up to that, I alluded to it definitely in the presentation during the Hill Country Economic Summit. I'm just continually overwhelmed with the entrepreneurial spirit, the inspiration that our business community provides for this community. And I see it at all levels, but I've just been so inspired throughout this entire crisis at how our community has come together and supported each other. And, I'm on social media, I'm posting, and I just am so inspired by the different types of businesses that are cross-marketing for each other, how they're doing that, how they're thinking out of the box to do it. And it just, it makes me proud. It makes me proud to be part of economic development. It makes me proud to be a part of this community. So most definitely community collaboration.
And I hear you in the sense that, I've worked for, several, for other economic development organizations in other communities. In fact, one was a regional one, binational, which represented two communities in two different countries. And the one thing that I have noticed since I've been here now about a year and a half is that there's that sense of that. I mean, you hit the nail on the head as far as community collaboration. That I'll go out on a limb here. That sense of that pioneer spirit. This community was founded on that kind of pioneer spirit, and it's still part of that fabric. I see it, I sense it, and during this pandemic, that's one thing that I have seen that just kind of transcends through our this particular time for our community. Now, another one that I've seen a couple of times asked is they're asking what businesses have actually permanently closed. I know you mentioned earlier in the presentation about temporary closures, but I guess I've got a couple people asking, well, what are some permanent closures that we have seen in our community, at least through the survey?
Well, and I have not heard of any permanent closures as of yet, and that is not reflected on the survey. So I would anticipate that we will see some closures, but again, I would really urge any business owner that is thinking of permanently closing to reach out to the resources that are available, both in grant opportunities at the SBA. Please go to kerrvilletogether.com or reach out to us. And let us help you with the funding opportunities that are there or other resources that are available during this time. I know the first set of stimulus funding is no longer available, but there is more coming, and there are opportunities for us to help you.
Thank you, Teresa. And then one more question, and I'll go ahead and I'll answer this one. And it's a conversation I was having earlier today with a local business owner, and I had been asked a couple of times before this as well from some of our local entrepreneurs and local employers, which is, I put in for the paycheck protection plan and some other funds, but my employees, are getting unemployment right now. Do I bring them back in order to, keep this money or not? And what they're trying to get at is if I reopen, for how long do I need to reopen? Or is it worth it, for the amount of money that I'm getting? So I've had, again, chat box, I've got, one comment in that regard, and had a conversation earlier today about that. And I've been asked a couple of times as well. And our response has been, use your best judgment. That's an internal, analysis that you as a business owner, business operator, that you have to do to weigh the, your pros and cons as far as, the funds that are there and whether to reopen and what the timing of that might look like. So that's basically use your best judgment, and that's an internal decision that ultimately you would have to make. Okay, so with that, Teresa, thank you, and thank you for the participants that joined us today. Again, there's going to be another webinar, another podcast. I highly recommend that you tune in, because those are our local business owners that are talking directly to you. And then the community update, which is aired on channel 2, I believe, which is a Kerrville City channel, next Thursday as well. And should you have any other questions, you know where to get a hold of us. We're usually pretty good about responding. I think Teresa's better than responding than I am sometimes. And feel free to call us anytime. And thank you again for participating in this webinar.
Thank you.